After all this, you still...
I still want that gas, yes. And you had better deliver.
All right. Welcome back to the Greenhouse, dear listener. I'm joined again by Gabby.
Hello.
At this rate, I think you are my most demanded return guest. I think, yeah, you've racked up most appearances at this point. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's not a contest, but if it was, you have won.
I'll keep that in my heart forever, honestly.
We love her, folks. We love her. So, I didn't have I prepared a bit of an outline for this one, but really I'm just basing this off of a chat we were having that had like my gears turning. And this is going to be largely subjective. I can't really cite anything. I tried to find an article we could do as a reading series for this one, but it was about like downward mobility and precarity. But it was a New York Times column. And I was like, I don't know what angle this is going to take. And the broad angle of the article at the end of the day was we should care about downward mobility because it's now starting to affect upper middle class people. So once again, New York Times, absolutely on the nose. But I think we were having a conversation about just how downwardly mobile everyone is, how difficult it is to find a job, the weird intersections of the troubles of daily life and how rights and benefits from work tend to fall, and alienation, loneliness. Really, why does modern life tend to suck so much? was the theme in that conversation. So I figured we could just have a grab bag discussion about that. And I think I'll start probably with what triggered the conversation was you mentioned that you were on someone's shit list for what you were saying about being married these days. But I think you had a very excellent point on it being tied to people's benefits and stuff, right?
Yeah, so I've been sitting and thinking a lot about the institution of marriage, for use of a buzzword, and how there's this divorcing, see how I did that? But from actual love and purity in a relationship into it becomes the most viable option for safety in terms of like financial institutions and otherwise, and how, I'm going to use the word bastardized too, which is another marriage adjacent word, but I'm full of them today. But how kind of this institution that originally, as far as I understand it, or not necessarily originally, but in my personal opinion, should be on the basis of two individuals wanting to share their lives together. And that's a very pure and beautiful thing about human connection and things of that nature. And it's been manifested in a way that is almost hidden by that. It's still viewed as this like pure, wonderful thing. But in reality, who does the civil union, the state side of marriage, who does it really benefit? And we get benefits, obviously. However, really you become, and this is the nihilistic take I found out of it, was you become less of a financial risk. This was triggered mostly by my current housing hunt with apartments and how me and my partner are viewed as like separate people just kind of rooming together, like, oh, you're roommates because we're not married, right? And if we were married, our income would be considered combined and we'd have a lot more access to a lot more housing options because we would reach their income qualifications. Because essentially, if they see our income qualification as together, they're going to view they're only going to view our income together if we're married, because we are prohibited by the state from easily leaving that union. And so you are therefore less of a financial risk. If you're just a couple who can leave at your own leisure, you are more liable to leave and therefore more of a risk, right? Your income can't be adequately combined. And it just sent this down spiral of like how we've taken this thing that should be about human connection, shrouded it in still that human connection basis, but really becomes this vehicle for stability for people who don't have as much money, which is really sad and miserable. How it creates situations where people can't leave. leave their relationships, how this isn't as much of a problem if you already have a lot of resources, because you don't really need to marry for those benefits as much. It's not as dire. It's quite a sad state of affairs when I look at my partner and I say, like, oh, should we get married because I want you to be able to have a right over me if I'm in a coma, or because we want more financial stability, when I should be asking that question because I'd like to spend the rest of my life with him. But that's not the case, right? So quite a nihilistic kind of miserable take on it, but that's where this started. was that down spiral.
Yeah, and it got me thinking about a lot of anecdotal things I can convey. I mean, we've all seen these bullshit articles that, you know, make us all mad about less millennials are starting families, less millennials are getting married, millennials didn't buy enough Starbucks this week, or whatever the fuck they need to say to gin up whatever. But we see it in our lives and in people we know. I hear this all the time, that people who were dating for a minute decide to get married because one of them has health insurance and the other doesn't, and they can get the vital health services they need that they otherwise didn't fucking have access to. When it comes to things like housing, I mean, finding an apartment these days is rough, but let alone trying to buy your own house, to come up with the funds to have a down payment or even to get approved. I mean, at this point, it's a bidding war. It's not like back in the day where you just went over and said, I'd like a house, and they just threw one at you. The barriers for entry get higher and higher and higher. And we're just seeing this more, where I think for our generation, under present conditions, it's less of this generation being uniquely fucked, according to boomers, and a lot more of this seems to be a generation that cannot make decisions on their own terms the way a lot of them would like. And more specifically, those traditional markers of adulthood cannot be reached at the same times or for the same reasons. So marriage, for example, instead of it being a celebration of love or as like a rite of passage or whatever traditionally people end up viewing it as, it ends up becoming one of those things where it's like, well, we needed to get married to get a house. We needed to get married to have health insurance, or be able to meet this criteria for stability.
Yeah, and I think I had this thought while I was talking earlier, but in relation to marriage, there's kind of this viewpoint that people collectively have, that the way marriage works now is more quote unquote pure, because if you think back to like political marriages from, you know, I don't know, the Middle Ages, if we're talking Europe or whatever, there's plenty of political marriages across the world. And that's been, I mean, it still happens, but it's much less frequent. Or you're not marrying, you know, you're not giving your daughter away and then giving the husband to be a bunch of money and the right over your daughter. Now it's much more, each person consents to that decision. But is that really what's totally happening? It's not as overt as it was before, but we think we've made all this progress toward, oh, people now can get married. But it's like, no, this is still a very confining type of thing that happens that isn't necessarily, like you were saying, people's full choice. It's just more hidden now. It's more secretive. Especially in terms of, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how marriage contributes to problems of intimate partner violence in couples. Especially, we see it can happen to anyone across any social standing, any kind of monetary benefit, anything. Like you can always have those situations happen, but you see them often in lower income relationships, and you have to sit here and scratch your head and wonder if these people are pushed into getting married because it has very real benefits, tax benefits, others, to say another we hadn't mentioned. And now they're stuck in a relationship that they can't leave without monetary benefit. They can't leave without having a lawyer. They can't leave without spending a lot of money. which is really screwed up. It's not appropriate. So we've just almost traded this lack of freedom into, we've disguised it as being a lot more free choice. But is it really free choice for people on the bottom, or is it freer choice for people who have the resources in order to leave, in order to not have to engage in these relationships? You can just, if you have the monetary benefits, you can just stay as a couple and not worry about it, because you can afford a house on your own. You have health insurance. You don't have to, you can do it out of love if you want to, and you can do it for just the ease of it, just the simplicity. There's also something to say too about even if you do get married and you don't change your name to be the same last name, do you really enjoy all of the benefits that other people do? There's still this kind of, I'm going to call out the patriarchy, but like that patriarchal system though, but where the name changing is weird to me. And it's okay if people want to do it, but at the same time, it's like you have to understand how it denies benefits for people who decide they don't. I never want to change my last name. I have 3 degrees at this point with my name on it.
You don't want to pay for the reprint. I sure as hell wouldn't. And
here's the thing: is my and also if you end up getting divorced, that's another nightmare, is trying to change your name back. Also, my partner, not to throw him under the bus, but his last name is ugly, and I don't want it. So he knows it's not a secret. So like. It's one of those things where it's like, even if you get married and you do all the things and you don't want to change your name because it's a pain in the ass, well, now people don't believe you're married. What if you walk into a hospital and your partner's, something horrible happened, and you say, hey, I'm their wife or husband or a partner, and they go, oh yeah, you don't have the same last name. Well, fuck you too.
Right. And I think like there's a lot to unpack here, and I'm trying to thread the pieces together. Thankfully, I'm sober, so this should be easier. But like again, like when I keep talking about this phenomena of greenhouse gaslighting and like this idea of like we keep telling ourselves these things that about the world we live in, that it's clearly dysfunctional in ways, but we believe certain things about it. And I think this just finite window that you've described is one of those ways in which in modern American society, we have these popular conceptions of living in a meritocratic society, broadly speaking, that if you work hard, X and Y and Z will happen positively for you. We have these ideas that our society is, broadly speaking, fair. And because of the widespread influence of free market purists, in my opinion, this idea of freedom of choice is incredibly pervasive. So I'm glad you brought that up. Because when we talk about things like healthcare, for instance, right, that's one of those things it's said like, it's said with faith. I'm not sure how else to describe how people say it, but there's this idea that, well, private health insurance guarantees freedom of choice, but in what sense? Mm-hmm. Especially if you take into account the reality that wages are on a downward spiral. The ease of finding a job is harder and harder. Do people really have a choice in their healthcare plan if they're trying to go for the cheapest option they need? Is that really a choice? Like they talk about it like you get presented a menu at a restaurant, but you have like all the allergies. Did you really have a choice when you walked into the restaurant if you have all the allergies? No, you were going to order white rice if even.
Like, and I think that's related too to like, but like choice for who? Right? Exactly. It's not, it's most people don't have a choice, but it's like who, I think we have this pervasive idea is enforced because there are some people who do get the choice, right? The people who have more money and who are able to devote resources to it. So we look at that and we go, yeah, the choice, it's there. See, look. However, it ignores the massive amount of people who are just literally scraping by and are buying whichever benefit package is affordable or taking whatever their employer decides is what they should get. They get one option, the money comes out of their paycheck, and that's
That
what you
people
get.
even have time to review these things. Like, do you think most people have a time to like find the benefits website their company has for them, look through all the possible options, and then calculate, okay, I could probably afford this month, and then try and you get locked into these plans too. So it's like you have the choice at the time of signing, then you're locked in until the next cycle.
Yeah, well, and if you're working, there's also like a difference between like working a salary job and working an hourly, because I know people who have worked hourly positions and they basically need to be hyper calculating their hours to make sure they're hitting that on average full time mark so that they can be eligible for healthcare benefits so they can actually sign up. And that doesn't say anything about the fact that then once they get it takes it out of their paycheck. But for, salary workers, you can just pick your care plan. Maybe it sucks and you wait for the next cycle, which isn't great. But when you're an hourly worker, there's the additional stressor of if I don't reach that average for what my company and what the state decides is full time, I'm not eligible for healthcare benefits. And that's a very real stressor for that first little bit of work. And sometimes it's completely out of your control. You might be trying to pick up every shift possible, but you're just not getting scheduled. Or maybe your manager who makes the schedule doesn't particularly like you for some reason, and they stop giving you as many hours. It happens. It's real. And so there's also that additional stressor for that situation too. It's like, damn.
Absolutely. And I think like when you bring these, because these aren't novel or esoteric critiques. These are daily concerns that people beyond just me and you have brought up day in and day out about the system. And especially with more right wing or more center, left, center, right at this point, opposition to that, it's like, well, that's the bureaucracy. That's not the system. And it's again said with the same level of faith. I call it faith because I don't know how else to describe it, but it's like, it's this idea of like, trust me, it's going to work itself out. And it's like, in what sense? In what sense is it working itself out for people? And it's one of those very unique breaking of the mask moments in these popular American conceptions of the free market, of the meritocracy, when anyone says anything about a universal program of any kind. And I'm not here to defend Bernie Sanders. I am, but that's not the purpose of today. We can get into that later. There will be a happy birthday Bernie episode, I promise. But I think with I'll be honest, I feel like a lot of the media opposition to Medicare for all or any kind of universal healthcare plan in the United States is largely astroturf. It's largely concocted just to manufacture enough doubt that like, well, it's going to suck more than what you already have. That's largely how it gets metabolized. And I'm not saying that any universal program is a silver bullet. Of course, that's a problem for public administrators and like the logistics of making that system, that takes time. I'm not denying that. But when you have something like universalized healthcare, all of a sudden people aren't tied to labor in that way. All of a sudden people aren't tied to their partners in that way. And especially when you were talking about intimate partner violence or people who are in just non-ideal situations, you know what I mean? Or even like if you're a younger kid who needs to like get away from the family or something like that, these are things that keep you tied. It's the literal like, well, we all implicitly understand to some extent that there's no pack it up and go to the farm in the United States. There is no farm. If there is, you are in debt to John Deere. You know what I mean? So you become reliant on what little you do get. Otherwise, you are homeless. You know what I mean? Yeah. But when we start to universalize these things, people get more independence. That's the part people aren't putting two and two together on, in my book, at least.
Yeah, it feels almost strange because the argument can be like against these kind of programs tends to be one of independence and one of free choice, and the idea that this will take that away. And it's like there's almost not an awareness of looking at the whole picture of like, but this system we already have takes your power away. You don't have power. You're making choices to survive. And that's why I don't, anyone who engages in, and I know like I went on a whole tirade about marriage, so I just want to make it clear, anyone who engages in marriage, like in my mind, I'm like, well, duh. I mean, that's one of the few benefits you're going to be able to afford yourself. Like I've sat and had conversations where it's like, well, this is just more viable. It's a better idea. If I'm going to be with you anyway, I might as well reap the benefits. And it's sort of like, I don't want to demonize people who engage in marriage, but it's just like being able to fully view the picture of like, I think a lot of this is also tied to like people wanting to make sense of the world and have control over it. And it's very scary to acknowledge that maybe you don't have control, or maybe these things are pushing you down. I think it's a lot more comfortable to feel like you are somehow in control of it, or you can change it, or you already have some type of determination that you're self-determining. It's a very uncomfortable feeling to be faced with forces that you can't necessarily control. So I think part of it comes from that too, the like reluctance to actually acknowledge how much these systems currently push us down, because they're shrouded in this idea of free choice, when really there's a lot of context and nuance that means it's not free. There's a lot of things holding you back, but it's a lot easier to, just strive for that better job, strive for more financial security, to invest money so you're not relying only on your income from your job, to, I don't know, do something on the side, like, open, or I don't know, random example is popping into my head is buying things off Craigslist and fixing them up and flipping them, right? Like silly things, but I see these, I see people in the real world doing these things to add to that, to their income, in order to not be completely dependent on their job, because it's scary.
Well, right, and we see this with the proliferation of like the online spaces. Like someone will have a banger tweet, and then like someone will be in the messages like, hey, can you advertise this product in the comments? We'll pay you $200 or something. Or with things like Twitch, or even like podcasts. Like I've said, I don't want a sponsor for this, but it was one of those things that just clicks in my mind. I'm like, well, this could be supplemental income, because no job's enough. You need supplemental income unless like you're making a fuck ton.
Yeah, and your job controls so much of your life. Like if you lose it, you lose everything. So having those pieces of supplemental income become really important. And I think, again, if we're talking about something like investing, people who have more money and who understand investments, who understand like a financial profile and things of that nature, who have the education to understand it, all of these things also tend to have more mobility, because their income isn't always just their job. They can move and change a job. They can be unemployed, and their whole lives aren't threatened because they have income coming in from other spaces.
Yeah, and that's, I had a point that I wanted to make about the American dream not being something that can be lived up to anymore, but I'll get back to that in a sec. The other thing that gets me about stocks or this side hustle stuff, I mean, this is something that keeps getting said, where like if someone just mentions, damn, this isn't enough, I don't know what I can do to scrape by, then everyone pops in with the, well, have you tried monetizing your hobbies?
Yeah,
you can't enjoy anything unless you're making money off of it, so you might as well go. Or this thing about stocks, or even crypto, which I think crypto is bullshit. But
God, don't even get me. We don't
don't
have the time.
No, because again, like I
read a bit about crypto.
I we can probably get into this, because when I had Cool Zone on, they were broadly able to explain why I've been saying that there's no new money to be made. So crypto exists as this fake market that you can be speculating. It's fake.
It's nothing.
They call it mining because it's supposed to like give the illusion of production. It gives the illusion of production, but what's actually being produced? Nothing.
It's that part. Okay, it's like that part. And did you watch WandaVision? I'm just gonna throw out WandaVision right now. I feel like everybody watched it, maybe not.
Yeah.
So there's a scene where Vision is working in the office, and he asks like what he actually does, like what do they produce? And they're like, we produce units or whatever they say. And I think of that when I think of cryptocurrency, because he's just like begging. He's like, what do we actually do? And they're like, things. And that's, to me, it's crypto. It's nothing. It's nothing. It takes up resources, which people I think also don't again, don't have the time to get completely into crypto, but like it's fake money and it's like a playground for rich people that
this is the same amount of waste as every other industry. That's why they think it's real. They see the carbon emissions go up and they're like, it's a business, let's do it. But
well, and to me, crypto is insidious too for a lot of reasons. But like one of the biggest ones is that it was created by people with an obscene amount of income, basically as a playground to have a new thing to fuck around with. And now you have people who are just trying to scrape by, who see maybe an opportunity to get involved. And so they're engaging with it too, because they kind of don't, it's not that they don't have a choice, but like I don't ever demonize people who are just scraping by and look at a little bit of a way to make money who are investing in crypto, because you know what, there's so few opportunities to make additional money without running yourself ragged that it's like I can't blame you. But then all it does is it benefits these people who created it in order to have basically just play around because they're bored. The alternative to flying into space, I guess. I don't know.
Right.
Bezos reference.
And it's the same thing with stocks, in my opinion, too, is like they keep talking about having a stock profile like it's this way to get financial independence. And I fail to fucking see that, because when you build up these investments, when you keep putting your income into this, especially after 2008, where we keep seeing faith erode in the market, when we keep seeing these bailouts and we see people get angry about the bailouts, and then someone comes at you and says, but you should sink your money into this. Like, I feel like it's this concerted effort. I can't cite this. Don't get mad at me. I'm being honest. But it feels like a concerted effort to put middle and lower class people into the stock market so that they're fully bought into the ideology of it. So that way, every time there's a crash, and then the next round of people saying, well, this is bullshit, we shouldn't be doing this, come in, now you have another class of investors who's going to say, whoa, I'm going to get my cut one day. You can't do that. Like
a predatory system where
it's a predatory system. Yeah.
You're rebreeding people to get engaged in it. Yeah. I'm a little less negative about stocks, not because I love the idea of investments, but only because I at least see, compared to crypto, I at least see that, like, okay, you give money to a company that you think will succeed, and you're kind of basically putting an educated bet. Yeah, it's a little bit more real. It's not totally real. It's not like you are trading money for an object like money was designed to do, but it's at least a little bit, there's at least some kind of like, okay, there is something you are putting your money into. To me, what makes me uncomfortable too, actually, is that a lot of retirement plans are contingent on investments.
On stocks.
And that makes me feel very weird.
Well, it is 100%, because you're sinking all this money. And again, dear listener, tune back into episode 20 with Cool Zone. Lennox does a much better job of explaining this than I ever can. Go follow Cool Zone. But basically, like, we've pulled all the money from the future today. That's how financing through debt works. That's how the 2008 crash happened. And you can also look at Yanis Varoufakis. He was the Greek economic minister. He explained this as well, as like how finance capital works today. Is a banker can he puts his arm into the future and pulls money out from the future and brings it to the present. And the assumption is they're going to pay it back.
Yeah.
But you keep pulling from the fucking future. How much can be paid back in time? That's the real question, if I can explain it in shitty terms. And again, if I'm saying it wrong, please correct me. I'll take it as the episode engagement. It being corrected is the episode engagement. But it's not sustainable to keep pulling from the future when there's no means to pay it back in the present. And I'm not exactly saying that I'm not saying gold standard. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying it turns speculative in a way that you can't keep up with.
Yeah, well, and I think part of the problem with this is a lack of understanding about how that works. So I have taken some classes about this, but I'm in no way an authority to teach anyone about how investments work and how any loans or all that works. But like, it's so funny because like learning it, it's actually like decently simple. Like when you think of like an interest rate, right? And again, I'm going to boil this down as simple as possible, but like, you borrow money now and the interest rate serves as almost your price for the loan, like, because they're going to give you the money now and money in the future is worth less. And when you get explained it feels confusing, or when you think about it, it feels confusing conceptually, because you are thinking about like, okay, future money versus now money, and how much is the interest to make sure that those things equate, and whatever it might be. But it's honestly not as complex as people make it out to be. I'm totally slaughtering a description, so like, do not use me as an authority on this. But watching some videos of people who actually are good at explaining this makes it actually pretty simple, and I almost feel like the mystery or the confusion in the way that it's explained, I don't want to say it's on purpose. Again, this is totally speculative and just very subjective in nature. But given after I started to learn how simple it actually is, I was like, why does no one know this? Why do kids not know this? Why, not kids, but like teenagers. When I say kids, I mean like teenagers. Like when they go into the world, why do adults not understand this? Like, it's pretty simple. And that feels like it's by design.
Well,
like,
right, because it walls it off. It's like, again, I'm still skeptical of the investment hoopla of people who just say like, you should put your money into stocks now, because I do think it's a predatory way to look for new investors, and I broadly don't agree with it as a concept. But that's a me problem. That being said, I mean, who gets to have access to these means of producing money has always been limited from the jump in our country. And when it comes to who has mobility and who doesn't, it works in the same ways. So I guess this brings me back to the original point that I was going to make about the American dream, is that the American dream as a whole, of like, not only that could you strike it rich, but that you have any say in that self-determination, that you have any control over that path. I mean, it's all but gone today. It's all but proven false at this point.
Well, yeah, I mean, and the fact that now we're turning on something like stocks as a way to do that, like, that's now kind of the conversation turner, which is maybe like a segue, but stocks are a good way to not only get supplemental income, but to move yourself up that ladder. Because it's been shown that hard work doesn't cut it. Hard work and a shit ton of luck instead. So it's like, oh, just, invest. Like, if you just invest more, like, that's a fair way. But when you think about an investment, I mean, the riskier you get, which are the ones that make the money that happen fast, you're not going to get rich off government stocks and bonds. I'm sorry. It's just off government bonds. It's not going to happen. They're safe, but it's never going to happen. When you invest in the risky stuff, though, that's what makes you strike it rich, essentially, and moves you up that social ladder. But the fact of the matter is that that's highly risky, and it ends up turning out similar to betting. I mean, it's not the same exactly, because there's a lot of things you can do, but when you don't have that expertise and you can't devote your time and you don't have the education to know what's the perfect investment or what's the safest investment, and you incur that risk, like, that just stands to hurt you, and it does end up working a lot like betting. And so people who have the expertise, it's not as much like betting. People who don't, who are encouraged to do this in order to strike it rich, it is. And a risky investment is what's going to make you the most money, but a risky investment in some company that, who knows, like, I don't know, say you invested in, say you invested in the fucking Snuggie. I don't know, like the company that makes the goddamn Snuggie. Honestly, for a little bit there, you probably would have made a good chunk of money, because those damn things were selling all over the fucking place. But now, I mean, you'd probably never catch anyone dead buying a Snuggie. I don't even know where the company is. And it's a game almost. And if you don't know the rules of the game, you're basically betting. And it's another way to basically fuck your life over if you're not careful.
But I guess
it's still just a misnomer.
Maybe I think the divergence to stocks helps in this case, because people still see the stock market as legitimate, despite just how much fuckery has happened in our lives surrounding the stock market, right? And I think it is just one of those things, like, because it is the literal lottery. People still have that idea of, well, if it doesn't pan out, it doesn't pan out. I guess that's what it is. even though like you can look at all these, and again, like financial crime is one of those fields that's interesting and dry all at once because it's numbers. But when you know just how much people have their finger on the scale all the time in this industry, and how much of, especially the neoliberal approach to finance capital, is pouring like ice water on a hot engine, it's particularly insidious to me, because I think more and more people again are just trying to like believe in that old idea of like, well, if you work a job and you put in yourself into it, you put your soul into it, you should at least live a decent life. And with more and more people saying, well, just, you know, take on a gig job, you know, get a supplemental income working DoorDash or Uber, start your OnlyFans, monetize one of your like social media accounts, or like become a internet micro celebrity and like have a Patreon, whatever. Like, these are not only things that you can look at objectively and be like, oh, so people get told this, but it's like at a gut level, we've all thought about it. We've all thought about like, damn, maybe I should pick up a side hustle. Damn, maybe I should you know, start a Patreon or something. Damn, maybe Adi should start OnlyFans. We'll figure this out.
I'll out myself right here. I literally I was in one of my grad classes, and I was just so fed up, right? I wasn't making very much money. Grad school can be miserable. And I looked at one of my friends. Actually, no, this was when we were remote, so I messaged her. We were in the same class in a Zoom call, and I sent her a message. I was like, should I just start an OnlyFans to like make money? And she was like, what are you talking about? She's like, you're literally getting your graduate like educate. Like, what are you talking? I'm like, well, I'll just make some extra cash. Like, it's fine. She's like, no. Like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. And I feel like it infects all that, like all of your viewpoint. I totally agree. I thought to myself, oh, you should like tutor for Chegg. What do you mean?
Why in the Kentucky Fried Fuck would I do anything off the clock?
Yeah, but I'm like, what is going on? But I'm like, oh, I can make a little bit of extra cash. I'm like, that's not. No, get out of here.
No, and they treat it the way we talk about it is also kind of weird. Like we talk about it like it's like money to like spend on like little trinkets or like Taco Bell or something. Like it's not like the fact that this actually becomes people's rent, that this actually becomes people's healthcare payments and shit. And it's also one of those things too, where like there's a lot of moralistic language that comes up around it. You know what I mean? Where people suddenly like start to talk about gig economy workers like they deserve to put themselves in this situation, and not the fact that for a lot of people this is the only employment they can seem to find. That for things like OnlyFans, you know, it's not even the position of you can't even do the swerve thing anymore of moralistically arguing about sex work. It's now the literal point of some people needed to make payments at this point. The literal fact of like precarity is not being addressed in any of this, where I think more and more the reality of one payment coming in to fuck up your day is the reality for a lot of people. And as much as I hate that New York Times column that I was reading earlier, like it has reached a point where precarity is hitting everyone. And I mean, again, not to cite Matt Christman again, but he was having this thing about how like the Trump base, which is more so affluent folks, which is more so like rich people, or even like our newest class of insane billionaires, Elon Musk, fucking Bezos, all this stuff. There's a weird kind of precarity that is hitting them too, and they're also acting out of sync.
Okay. Yeah, I'm like stuck on. I feel like if this is something that's permeating all levels, right? Which I can't speak too much to, but it's almost interesting because I've known people who have lived. I know someone who's lived just on that precarious space their entire life, right? It's always been the reality. It's been the they can barely afford to, they save up all their money, they buy a car that's shitty, the car breaks down, everybody asks them why they didn't buy a better car. Why didn't you just wait and buy? He said, well, I need one now. And that precarity of supplementing income with donating plasma was one, which feels insane to pay rent, to pay for a car, to buy a car that is a necessity where they were living. And I feel like this precarity is so familiar, but it's almost interesting because now that it's becoming more of a conscious awareness, or more people are experiencing it, it's something everyone's talking about, which I feel like there's a sector of our society who's always lived like that. They're like, well, duh. Like, duh, I needed to always do these side hustles. Duh, I needed to, spend all my money on this thing, or I was one emergency away from losing my housing, right? And I just think it's interesting that now we're at a point where it's coming into public consciousness because it's affecting so many more people, even people who are making what we would all consider quote unquote livable wages, the 40K a year, which is like the standard, right, that everyone talks about, is not becoming a standard. It's still a precarious space to be. I also think, not to tirade too much in the opposite direction, but also feel like this has to do with the consumer culture, and I'm going to get on that for a second, but it's that impulse I feel like we have culturally to as soon as we make more money, we feel the need to fulfill that with extra things, right?
A
to
nice
maybe
house, a nice car.
Do you need do you need the 3-bedroom apartment that costs an extra $500 a month? Yeah, you can afford it. But do you need it? Is that necessary? And I think people get stuck in that trap a lot of continuing to consume higher and higher that equals their earnings unnecessarily, which I think adds to the precariousness of every single person at every single level. It's not, I don't know where I'm exactly going with this, but I think that plays a part too, which I almost feel like consumer culture is a way of feeling more comfortable. Like, I don't know. I think it's a coping mechanism. Like, I feel like
it is. And I think, like, I don't want to wear all my influences on a sleeve. Just know that I'm quoting Matt Christman here on this. And again, that probably is my inspiration with this show, but it is a good observation to run with. And I don't know if it's necessarily his, but broadly, how you express yourself in America is through your consumer decisions. The only real idea we have of engaging the world or engaging ideas is at this consumer product level. And I mean, with the most recent, this is not the most recent, this is the start of the pandemic, actually. Remember in Michigan, like at the start of the pandemic, you had all these people upset that they couldn't like go to restaurants, go to shops, go to barber shops.
Applebee's.
To Applebee's. I can't go and yell at the waitress at Applebee's. And like we had our fun with it. We all got to like, wear our liberal shirts and have gay sex afterwards. But sorry. So after the fact, it's suddenly like it just clicks, like, wait, is it just to like go shopping? Is that it? Is that all this is? And then like I started to realize too, like even in my own life, like what can you really do aside from go to the store, go to the mall, go to the strip mall, go to the fucking, you could go to the park or something, and like there's those aspects. Yeah, but broadly speaking, we're always engaging the market here.
We are. Well, and it's going to get me on my feel. Oh, it's raining. My feelings about libraries, because libraries are one of the few spaces where people can just be without the expectation of spending or buying. Now, there is kind of I'm going to be fair when I say that. To get a library card, oftentimes you need to have an address in the area you're in, and if you don't have an address because of financial insecurity or any other, that becomes a problem. But in the city I live in, the library was like, we would go there, and I've always lived in rural communities, and when I didn't live in a rural community, I was going to school in a fairly well-to-do area, right? So I had never seen this before, where I went to a library to go like get a book out or print something or whatever, and it was just full. I mean, literally full of people, just people sitting around, people on the computers, people wandering around the library. And it struck me in that moment. I was like, damn, like, especially in city areas, libraries are one of the few places you can go. No one's going to tell you need to spend money there. No one's going to tell you need to leave. No one's going to bother you, essentially, as long as you're being, respectful. You're not like screaming or something. So it's interesting though, because it's like parks, but even parks, you have parks that are paid enter. I mean, those exist a lot, and there's a lot of them. And usually they're the really nice ones. So I almost feel like it's like one of the few safe havens of places where you can just be. But I totally agree with that. That's where my library rent. Support libraries. Go rent from the library. Stop buying books from Amazon. There we go.
Well, yeah, and I mean, like, it just furthers that reality that for a lot of people, spending and making money is the cornerstone of their life, and we don't have those institutions or places in like public life anymore where like not only is there not an expectation to spend money, but like you can just live, you can just walk around, you can just like exist and like not only be safe, but like that's just a part of life where you live. You just went to the library to chill. Now, for most of us in the Midwest, it's walking around a big box store. I'm not sure if everyone else does this, but like,
I used to do it all the time. Yeah.
The joke in Michigan is like, hey, you want to go to Meijer? We're not going to get anything. We're just going to go walk around the store.
The precursor of my relationship, like one of the things we did in the first summer I was with my partner was we would go to Meijer at 2 a.m. Okay. And then just walk around. Yeah. Just wander around. Sometimes we would get baked goods from the oops, we baked too much section, which is the we fucked up and please buy these, they're clearance. And that was our entire trip. And we did it like maybe 2 to 3 times a week, which is weird. It's weird. But it's true. I almost feel like some of those box stores though, like your Walmarts, your Meijers, I'm doing the Midwest thing with the plural, but, I feel like they are a place where you're supposed to spend, but at the same time, the employees are paid so little and no one gives a shit. So you could just walk around and not spend anything and no one bothers you because they don't notice you've been there for the past 2 hours.
Maybe that's a positive thing. Maybe we should all try to reclaim public spaces like that, even if they all get privatized. Fuck it, we're gonna reclaim these privatized parks one day.
Yeah. Also, fuck malls. I just want to throw that out there. I know you don't technically, quote unquote, need to spend money at a mall, but there's one thing my mother was always very strong-willed about, and that was she's strong-willed about many things, but she hates malls, or she hated malls. She was always very. She thought they were like the consumerist, like a hellhole of consumerism. That's just depressing. There's no like good windows to the outside world. It's just this miserable place where you walk around to spend money. And I identify with that. Like I feel that. I walk into a mall and I'm like, I know that I don't technically need to spend money, but the fact that people just go to walk around and that's one of the only places to do so, yeah. Kind of fucked up when you think about it.
Because you don't have anything nice like a promenade or like a boardwalk most places. You gotta
and
even then those places get turned into malls of a sort.
Yeah, you just walk around the fucking mall and then you're subjected to looking at the piercing pagoda and wondering as the people, the little children get the little piercing gun in their ear and you're like, oh no. Go to a real piercer, please. Go to a piercer. Not the pagoda man.
On one end, it's Macy's. On the other end, it's oh my gosh. And here's something funny. Look this up because I'm going to fuck up the retelling. So this is based on facts, but I'm paraphrasing heavily. Is the guy who invented malls wanted to actually approach them from more of like a humanist perspective.
Okay.
Like he wanted them to be like self-contained communities. So it wasn't just like shops. But it was more like there'd be housing. So it would be like public housing, places to like gather, places to like go have fun, places to like shopping would be a contained aspect of it. It wouldn't be the whole point. And even workplaces. And like you still see that in some parts of the world. I mean, they're bringing this back in the United States, but more so in the other parts of the world than the United States. Like, you would have office spaces in malls as well.
Mm-hmm.
So he was thoroughly disappointed with what became of the mall when it started to be put into practice, which is just another real estate shithole that shops lease up space in.
Yeah, I've just as a side note to this, I'm sure everyone has gone to a dying mall at some point in their lives. There is nothing to me that is more depressing than a dying mall. Like, I can't even describe the feeling. I think everyone at some point in their lives should find themselves a dying mall. I guess the criteria for this would be at least one of the large box stores on the end of the mall is closed, minimum one, and the rest
closed Macy's. Oh my god!
They closed the Macy's, they closed the J.C. Penney, the Sears. One of them are closed. All right, and then I don't even know if Sears exists anymore in its true form. Anyway, and the other criteria is, I would say, about a third of the other stores need to be closed. And you just walk by and there's just like shuttered, they've got the gate pulled down, and maybe there's a Bath and Body Works still existing, and there's a 3 doors away there's a let me see, a Hot Topic, a place I spent a lot of time in my youth.
Which again, Hot Topic has declined. Like, it used to be like a scene kid type place. Now like half their inventory is fucking Funko Pops.
Oh my god, okay. The spooky, maybe I'll have to cut this part, I don't know. The spooky door from Hot Topic, the spooky archway, the red letters, man, that shit, I was like, this store is, and I was like 12. I was like, this is where the preps are in fear, and I can go and be safe. This is where I need to be. And now it's like palatable. It has nice windows. It's got inoffensive lettering. And I'm like, there's no screamo music playing. And I'm like, this is no longer a safe haven. The nerds won.
We live in the reality where the nerds won. And like, me as someone who got thrown into the nerds and was never accepted, I'm like, this is not the world I wanted either. Where are the kids who went to sleep after school? I should have been with that group. Like, oh my gosh. Yeah, because broadly speaking, that's all there really is to do, and that's all we can really aspire to culturally these days, is like the next big purchase of having a house. Maybe getting married is one of those goals for people, but less and less it seems to be something that people can organically choose to meet as their goal. And for a lot of people I've talked to, especially, like, the thing that did them in for marriage was something about financial stability, or it was about ease of access to something. And I think there's something fundamentally sad about not being able to live a life on your own terms. And ultimately, like, that's where I'm at too, is like, my only thing I can say is like, my next thing I want is a house so I can get a dog and I can get married. Yeah. It's stupid that's where I'm at. And like, I wish I had something better to aspire to. And I hope that people aren't as jaded as me. I hope people really have dreams still. I really hope that people find things in their lives that give them purpose, because I've struggled with that lately. And this is something that I wanted to get into as well, was not just precarity, but how atomized and how alone people seem to be these days as well. And I think we've heard this term tossed around a lot. Everyone across the ideological spectrum has said it to some extent, or at least that's my way of saying I heard it on Joe Rogan too, was more and more people are lonelier than they've been, not only in their own lives, but in historical levels too. And there's something interesting I see about the advice that's given to people of, well, you should move to where the jobs are type approach. Well, you should go there. And people tend to work longer hours for less. It's harder to meet people, and especially with the advent of remote work for those of us in the professional managerial class, or the quote unquote middle class, to the lack of in contact services, to even like with things like in the gig economy, you don't even need to know the person you're getting services from. They can leave it at your door and they can like, you never have to interact with a single person. Broadly speaking, there seems to be a increased level of atomization in our society. I can't speak for the rest of the world, but it feels more and more like people are atomized. And maybe that's just me extrapolating a personal problem onto the world.
Yeah, I almost feel like related to employment too. Like, I feel like a lot of people gather their friend group or individuals and they meet new people through work. And with that, the advent of the gig work you mentioned, the remote work, it's becoming less and less common that you're interacting with people on a regular basis. I have experienced this. I've worked remote since the pandemic started. Well, before the around then, whatever, over a year. And it is isolating. It's very people that I think I would have gotten to know a lot better through casual conversations, I'm not able to talk to on a regular basis. It's very bizarre. And I think, do I think that most social interactions should be based on like your work experience? Like, no, probably not. That's probably not a very healthy system we set up. But that was the standard before COVID hit. And now that's completely changed. So I definitely agree. I agree with that a lot. I think we'd be remiss if we did not mention social media and the aspect that has on it and how people kind of curate their personality in social media. And so I think social media is real, but I think we're seeing a lot less genuine interactions because I always keep in mind when I see someone's social media page, it's almost like a Facebook page to me, or even a Twitter page can be this way. The Facebook more so because the way it's designed feels like a social resume. Maybe I've said this before, but it's literally like you look at that and you see the curated version of what someone wants you to see about their life. Same thing with like a Twitter page or any other social media aspect that people are using. And I think that cuts down on the amount of genuine interactions you can have. Because say you go and meet these people in person, or you interact with them in person and you find out that the curated version of themselves isn't who they are. Because of course it's not. I mean, of course, I'm not going to put on Twitter or Facebook when I am being a raging asshole. That's never going to happen, which does happen. And everybody has moments like that. So I think that also undercuts a genuine interaction because people are disillusioned by someone they meet that isn't up to the standard of what they've built up in their head via a social media page and social media interactions. Because even texting, you can reread what you write and send the best worded thing to this person you don't know. Or don't know very well in a real context, and curate that version of yourself so that you look as good as you can. And that undercuts genuine social interaction because it is real. But I can say from my own experience, I text people I don't know that well much differently than I text people I know in real life. People I've interacted with in person, people that know me. I text like a fucking idiot when I text them. Like I'm like literally sending 10 messages and misspelling every other word. But when I'm texting someone I don't know that well, I'm like, oh, I need to make sure this sounds good. I need to make sure that they have a good picture of who I am. It's, it's not me, but it's definitely a edited version of me.
Yeah, no, I feel that entirely. And this is something that, again, from the inception of this podcast, like I started with get off social media and then I have not done that. And I'm not sure to what extent anyone can fully log off. If you can get off and never come back, great. I think that's the best approach, but you can't fully log off physically. But I think like what I've noticed is it's like an abstracted way of interacting with people. It's like, I'm not sure how much mech anime you've watched, but it's literally like that's how I feel about using any technology at this point. Because if you view like the human body as like this flesh bag piloted by the brain, I can't say it any other way. But I think it's important to affirm, especially with how there's an emotional aspect to social media use. Where people describe feeling alienated, where people describe just feeling out of themselves or out of their minds when they use it. Like, this is where I think that, especially like lately, this understanding of the mind and body as one entity matters, because we're conditioned to viewing them as separate and just seeing yourself holistically. This is not even political advice I'm giving at this point. This is just like life advice. I don't know if I'm qualified to give that, but it matters to some extent, because at least when I use social media, I can't say this is how everyone uses it. It's like now my brain is not using my body to communicate. My brain is now like directly through the phone trying to communicate. Now my phone's my body, and then it's a new like personality I'm trying to create. And we talk about like these narratives we try to create on people's social media stories, or like we talk about how Instagram people make their lives look a lot better than they really are. Or on Twitter, you try to look smart but also funny, and then Facebook is like, look at all these life events I'm like plowing through. LinkedIn I don't even know what LinkedIn is.
We don't even. I don't.
It's corporate.
Oh,
Corporate
LinkedIn is
smile.
LinkedIn. Yeah, it actually feels like LinkedIn posts feel like the equivalent of that's like stock photo of like people sitting around like
Right,
like smiling, like looking down at you, like it's a perspective shot. You are with the corporate entity. You are smiling along with them. Like
it's that picture of like a crisp dress shirt and like the crossed arms. You know what I'm talking? That's what
they're all
LinkedIn
looking
is.
at you, like you're looking back. It's a perspective shot. This is who you are. You need to be. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think I want to say, as soon as you mentioned how much mech anime, my brain immediately was like giant mecha suit with a tiny phone trying to text.
Right.
And it's just an image that like I find so like I don't know, it's comedic. Like I'm thinking like the mecha from specifically Code Geass, like just like the tiny little. Anyway,
I was going from the mecha and regular show when regular show did the mech anime parody. You remember?
Oh my
and they
God.
all get in like different layers of mech to pilot like the more advanced version.
Oh, regular show. God damn. Oh shit. Yeah, I totally agree though. I feel like people create it, like it's like what I said earlier, that people are curating it, and then there's also like a stress, and then based on like you said, each social media outlet is like a different curated version of yourself you have to be. Which is very strange, right? Like if you looked at someone's Twitter versus their Facebook versus their Instagram, it's like a completely different person.
Wildly different.
Yeah, like it's like very strange. And that's why I feel like for me, I try to limit how many I use, because I've never been one to, and I'm going to throw an anthropology word out there, but I've never been one to code switch, or I do, everyone does, but I'm not intense. I feel like the version of me that people see generally is the version of me that does exist. However, that even gets warped with social media. Like I feel it being warped, and I think Twitter might be the worst one in my life, because I feel like Facebook is more of an extension of who I am. I have very few friends, so it feels everyone who's on there knows me personally. But it's a weird. It almost makes you feel dissociated from yourself, like reading your own stuff.
You have to react to everything and everyone at once, and it's. I keep talking about feeding the content machine. I'm not sure what I'm getting at, other than like that temptation of like, you always got to post, you always got to make videos, you always got to make podcast episodes or whatever, because you have to be productive when things aren't going your way if you're downwardly mobile. I'm not sure how else to describe that, right?
What there's like a need to be heard, right? Like when there's so many voices and there's so much going on and it's all happening at one time, it's like you're a desperate need to and want to be heard and to connect with people, especially the lonelier you feel. And so you use these tools designed for connection, but then you end up feeling less genuine. And we don't even need to get on Twitter and how bad faith takes and bad faith reads are pretty much the tagline of the entire site.
Well, yeah, and I mean,
defending like this version of yourself that you are trying to create, and people aren't getting it, and there's a lack of communication. It's just a shit show.
Absolutely, 100%. And like in episode 4, Matt was saying this of like, it's a non-dialectical space fundamentally. Like, you are not going to explain an idea or learn anything there, because I don't know what it is aside from the fact that like it's an entrepreneurial space, or whether it's like you have to talk about something in this bizarre absolute sense. Like, you are giving an absolute statement per tweet, but no person communicates in absolutes like that. Do you know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Well, I'm a firm believer that the entire world is made up of various gradients, right? And I feel like something like a space like Twitter, or even if we're getting back to like this kind of concept of consumerism, I feel like a consumer's culture is almost absolutist too. Either you value this thing and so you pay for it, or you don't, or you value your time. Like, there's these very economic principles are very absolutist in the way that they view things. That's why I personally prefer behavioral economics if I'm going to look in economics at all, because it acknowledges the humanistic part of who we are and what we're like, and that we don't make the most quote unquote logical decisions because we live in a world where there's a varied amount of gradients and different perspectives and different things impacting what we do. And something like social media isn't able to capture that, or maybe doesn't even want to capture that. I mean, the goal is to keep you online, back to the consumerism piece. You're the product, they want you to stay on. And so the more you have to explain yourself and the more you have to try to create a gradient where there is none, the more you're going to be on the site so that you can have this best version of yourself. Yeah, and I don't engage a lot on social media. I mean, I'm the textbook person who likes and retweets things and does not tend to comment or do anything of the like, because I just don't care to. I don't care to engage in that way. It doesn't. I don't like it. I even find sometimes I feel nervous about even commenting on my own friends' things, people I know in person, that I think, oh, are they going to take this the wrong way? Are they going to see this wrong? And I'm like, damn, like, this has really turned me paranoid, hasn't it? Because of those absolutes, right?
Yeah, and I guess this probably is going to bring back several threads from several other episodes. So this episode has gone all over the place. Yeah. Again, listener, you get what you paid for, and you paid nothing.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the fucking show.
We're doing whatever the hell pops into our little brains.
It's a dialectical space, okay?
That's a very smart way to put it.
But yeah, so the last place where you see the kind of bullshit, especially on political Twitter, but it kind of occurs in a lot of spaces, I'd say. Really, it is the Tumblr exodus to Twitter that you see point A to point B, how it went down. Because if you remember, like, that golden age of Tumblr.
Oh, yeah, I do.
It was academic essays from people who didn't understand what they were talking about. They're talking about theories. They're talking about hierarchies but it's in the context of, I hate this user's fucking take on Steven Universe. Here's why they're not intersectional enough or whatever, which already they bastardized the intersectional theory there.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's just, they were like, fuck it. We can't see titties anymore. Let's move to fucking Twitter. They moved to Twitter and they're doing the same shit, but now they have to do it as a Twitter thread. And for some reason, it just like, I don't know what it is. It turned it from like a knife fight to a gunfight, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because it's a more reactive space. I mean, even the platform of Twitter is meant to be reactive. I mean, the fact that you see what your friends like is weird. The fact that you see what not just the people you follow like, you also see what the people they follow have liked or retweeted, which is bizarre. It's just it's designed for engagement in a way that Tumblr wasn't. I mean, Tumblr for me was highly engaging, but it's not designed in the same way Twitter is. Actually, on Tumblr and that, oh my god, it's like dredges up so many memories. It just like hurts. I'm in pain. But I feel like there was a culture that did shift over of that absolutism, or I feel like people are more kind of coming back to a point from earlier, are more comfortable with knowing things and feeling comfortable in absolutes, or feeling more comfortable in really constructive labels. So I think if I'm going to say the word label, I'm I need to say that the LGBT community, especially the roots in Twitter, were very guilty of this, of over labeling and over binning people. You're seeing a movement away from that, I think, but it's all kind of back down to that same kind of toxic behavior of, we want to grasp what's going on, we want to be comfortable with what's going on, and we want to know everything about it. And it's hard to understand something in gradients. It's easy to understand things in absolutes. If something's absolutely bad or absolutely good or absolutely this thing, it's much easier to understand it and engage with it, I think. And people, I think, inherently feel more comfortable with it. Maybe that's like a big old large-scale statement to make about everyone, but from my experience,
it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. And like ultimately, like to tie it back to the alienation aspect, like this, it hits two ways for the person who's in the most alienated position, because not only are they physically isolated for whatever reason, be it they don't have the time to go out and see people, they just can't meet the scheduling requirements to meet people, there's just no way to interact, or they're just far away, what have you. And then you combine that with, okay, I might just go online and figure out if I can interact with people that way. And then you have all these different purity tests and fucking absolutist explanations of identity. And especially like, let's actually put it back into the context of LGBT people online, especially for younger people who were trying to discover things about themselves because they might have been isolated at their school, or they didn't have too many friends growing up, or whatever the fuck it is. That's not relevant to this point.
Yeah.
But they get on, and already there's people with vehemently absolutist takes on transgender identity, especially the, what is it? People who are strict, like one-to-one versus people who see it as more of a fluid process. That was one of those beefs that was like escalated on Tumblr heavily. And I'm paraphrasing it. Unfortunately, I don't understand too much about it. I just know that it's one of those discussions that exists to be had just to be had, and isn't useful for people who are trying to learn about themselves, right?
Yeah, and I can speak from my own experience on this, is that like, I was on Tumblr back then, and I was, I wasn't incredibly young, but I was definitely impressionable and young. And from my experience, it was mostly asexuality, which was a really weird space for me to be existing in, because I was constantly based on what people said and these absolutes and these definitions that were very constrictive, deciding that there's no way I could, because maybe this specific instance or this scenario that this happened or whatever. And even as an adult, I feel like I still struggle a little bit with that. And I see people discussing it online as well still. I also think that there is like a denial of people's identities and how they intersect. Haha. But like genuinely, I do feel like there's also this pervasiveness of stereotypes around different groups of people. I also identify as bi, and I get a fucking headache every time I see someone who is also bi, who's like, bi people do this, bi people do X. Well, look at
I hate that. I fucking hate that.
Dude, and it's funny because I'm just sitting here going, you in this group are perpetuating the same stereotype that other people are using. And when I get these comments from people that are like, oh, you're bi, so you can think that these people are all hot. And I'm like, but I don't find anyone hot, because I'm also asexual. So shut up. I just think it's so, it's pervasive. It's so pervasive, and it shapes your own identity, and it makes you feel trapped. And it's like, for a young, impressionable person, I'm glad I wasn't on a website like Tumblr or Twitter when I was like 14, right? I was on Gaia Online when I was 14.
That's also gay. That's also gay, though.
Which dates me. But also, like, it's just one of those things where I'm so fucking glad I wasn't on a space where people were telling me what my identity should or is or could be and what needed to be. I wasn't on these websites till I was a little bit older, and I could kind of sift through a little bit more of the bullshit. But I feel genuinely bad for 14-year-olds who are trying to figure their shit out and are running around on Twitter.
Right. And it's the worst part about it, I feel like, is like, you don't even get to ask the question, well, what makes this anonymous user an expert on my life or what I'm going through, until you fucking look at the numbers game and you see like, this has 9,000 likes, Everyone like follows this person, and then you just start to think in your head like, oh fuck, where do I go with this? What am I supposed to do?
That clout for actual expertise in something, because a majority of people start to agree. It's like, god damn, like,
and that behavior is like reinforced through that like market effect of like, you got to generate clicks, you got to generate controversy, you got to use the controversy to generate clicks, and it just creates this space for, I mean, let's talk specifically about the LGBTQ community then, or San Franciscoization on very, you need to be able to use the right label signifiers to describe yourself. And if you're having any ambiguity or doubts, there's no space for support, you're fake or whatever, you know what I mean? And then it's the same thing too, where like the culture for queer people has always been like, because it's not, there's no leaders to this, and calling it a community may not be accurate, right? It's more of a term we use to describe people that has been the most useful way of doing it so far. At least that's how I see it, right? It like, and again, like you're saying about like bisexual people and whatnot, I mean, it turns into who the people who say they're bi and what they view as appropriate for people like them to do, and then the people who speak the loudest about hating them and why they hate them the most. And it turns into all that bullshit about being bi versus being pan. Bisexual people aren't real, or like, you know, have to be this kind of annoying type. And I mean, at least for me, right, like I've always seen it as like, I am a proverbial large-headed Midwestern male, and I've always felt like gender is kind of alienating for me, right? But if it's useful to define myself as a male, I'm a male. But I did flirt with non-binary identity for a second. And it was just one of those things where I felt too scared to say that, or I saw people like get upset about it so much, because it's like, no, you have to meet this signifier of being this amorphous twink to meet the fucking criteria. Otherwise you don't get it. You have to get married on our terms, not yours. You have to be non-binary on our terms, not yours. And it's the same thing with bisexuality and stuff too, is like, you have to meet someone else's expectation of who you are and not your own expectation of who you should be.
I almost feel like it gets even more, not to a rabbit hole too much, but like when it comes to bisexuality too, this lack of like an understanding. First off, anytime I have someone who hears, if I say bi and they go, oh, so you're not like into non-binary people or trans people, I'm like,
I hate that.
Fuck you. Like,
I hate that
fuck
so
you.
much.
I'm like, they're like, well, why don't you say pan then? Because I don't fucking wanna. Like, that's why. Like, leave me alone. And I think it's one of those things too where like there's that, which is just so frustrating, but it almost becomes even more dangerous when you have, not, I don't want to say dangerous might be a strong word, but like I've had people who are straight or hetero come to me with these ideas that they've seen spread by other bi people and thinking that they are something that also, you know, clicks with me. I mentioned earlier that idea of like, oh, you like this thing or this person, so therefore you must be attracted to them. And it's like, there are bi people who make jokes about that. And I'm like, that's great and fine and dandy that you're making jokes about that. But like, goddamn, I don't want to have to explain myself every time to people that are well-meaning, but they just don't understand it because they've been given this information on authority from a bi person, but that doesn't mean shit. I mean, I also think, kind of sidebar to this, the community, LGBT community, I also agree that it's not really a community in a real sense of the word. I think the people who are in the quote unquote community are the people who are engaging in discussions and people who are visible. Because I have a lot of people who fall into the LGBTQ umbrella in my life that couldn't give two shits less about what the quote unquote community says. They're like, I like dick or I don't like dick. And that's really what they think about. That's all their, you know, their thoughts.
That should be it, honestly, at the end of the day, maybe. Fuck.
Yeah, and so like they don't engage in these conversations at all. And I wouldn't say they're not LGBT. They're clearly LGBT, but like I wouldn't call them as part of the, you know, community, because I think the community is more about engaging, and it can be a very helpful place where you can learn and connect with people who are like you. but it also can be, as we've been talking about, damaging, and people telling you what you need to be and who you should be, and you don't belong in this community unless you are. So maybe we should just fuck off.
Well, yeah, and ultimately, like, I'm gonna come out and say this is like, I think at a point everyone has that right to self-determination, and there are systems in place that prevent them from doing that. There's economic ones like the ones we were talking about, there's legal ones, and then like also there's just this like clout game bullshit like in the queer community now that we're talking about it specifically, right? And it's just one of those things where like no one's going to meet all the fucking markers for identity. These were supposed to be like descriptive, not prescriptive.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's like, well, you got to look like this trending person in media, or you have to meet this like so online clique. First of all, I'm pretty sure they all don't look that hot. Like, there's this whole thing of who's bisexual and who isn't, and it's like, you know what? Fuck it. Courage the Cowardly Dog is a bi icon. We stand. Fuck it. That whatever. But at just at a point, it's like it's turned into a validation machine. And I think we've maybe given up on community in some sense. Like we believe more in validation and gratification and consumption and pleasure than we do in getting to know people authentically, or self-discovery or self-realization and all of that shit. And that's, I don't know if this is even a good way to end this, because we've been at this for a second, but
yeah, I mean, feel free to chop this up however you need to.
No, this went really well. I don't plan on editing this, to be honest. I think it was all pretty good. And if, again, you get what you paid for and you paid nothing. So I think it's just interesting to note that like we buy all these fake ideas of fairness or meritocracy or what a community is or all of that shit. And these don't apply to our day-to-day realities. But there needs to be faith in something bigger than ourselves. That's the only way I look at this. Like, there needs to be some kind of like, you can't be 100% nihilistic about it. You can't just be like coldly objective in a way that doesn't add up. There should be a purpose to this, in my mind, at least. And if there isn't, then we should all just say like, hey, this is an undignified way to go about this. This is not a humane way for us to engage in this. And whether it's something as petty as identity, or whether it's something as real as like people's day-to-day economic realities, I don't think you should be gaslit in the greenhouse. I don't think you should accept the raw deal and take it personally, because so many people internalize this shit. And they think, well, it's got to be a problem with me. I haven't worked hard enough. Maybe I'm not meeting these parameters or what have you. But I think there's nothing wrong in accepting you live in a dysfunctional reality and you don't need to take it personally.
Yeah, I think kind of adding to a final thought too, I think when we look at structures like this, or we look at things that might feel less than ideal, or these situations, or these structures that we have in place, whether it's an identity or, I mean, we started with the whole marriage thing, or anything like that. I think it's important too to look at it and think like, who does this benefit? Who's benefiting from this? Who benefits from the restrictive definitions of what it means to be bi or non-binary or otherwise? Mm-hmm. And if you realize that it's not serving you and it's not helping you, there's nothing wrong with divorcing yourself from it. There it is again, divorcing. But like divorcing yourself from it and saying like, no, I'm not going to live my life in that way. And I think we would all be better for questioning these structures and questioning our place in them. And if it's something that we really do benefit from, it's something we want to do. So not getting married because that's just what you do and it's a goal. Getting married for very real purposes, or understanding, the implications of that, or picking a label based on what's healthy for you and not feeling the need to justify that to anyone else around you. Because if it isn't serving you or benefiting you or making you better, there isn't really a reason to engage with it, in my opinion. or if you're not helping in some way. That's kind of my short form ending thought, is really just analyze these things around you, analyze your world around you and these structures and the things that make you feel bad, or maybe even the things that are goals, and think, if they're societally pressured or pressured by a community, is this serving me? Is it helping me? Or who, if not, who is? Because I guarantee you every single structure benefits somebody.
Someone who's
benefits
not
someone.
you.
Yeah. And if it's not serving you, don't feel restricted to behave with it. It took me a long time to learn that I can live my life however the fuck I want. And I know that sounds silly, but like, I don't need to be married at a certain point. I don't need to buy a house at a certain point. I don't need to live in a certain way. Like, I can go do whatever I want as long as I, within reason. And there are things that hold you down. But aside from that, don't let your own perception of what society's kind of pushed on you or what culturally has been pushed on you as the reason that you're doing something. Analyze it for yourself, figure out if that's a goal you want, and then go for it. I guess is the more optimistic take on some of this. We talked about all the very real realities of economic mobility and all of that. So that, with the precursor of all the things I've already said without repeating them.
Well, and I mean, that's
optimistic
really,
end.
well, and that's really what I'm getting at. I think at the end of the day, and I guess maybe this is the approach I'm leaning towards, is like, it's okay if the people who are detractors of your position are saying, well, you need to come back with a report and you need to back this up, because you don't, if you understand at a gut level that this is all wrong, or you feel undignified in this, that needs to come out before you do anything else. Then you can get into the whole, like, I have this study here that proves that this is all bullshit, or like, actually, you're wrong and here's why. Like, you don't need to jump into the debate mode. And I think a lot of this useless political discourse, or a lot of like why people feel kneecapped, is because they feel like they have to play the mainstream games of political norms or of debate or things like that. And I'm not saying that you need to be undignified about it, but all I'm saying is, like, there is a gut level check more and more so every day that people are having of something is not right. And the way that people are suffering day to day is not just unjust, it's also undignified. And there's no joy in a world like this. And that's not an immature thing to want. It's not a unrealistic thing to demand. And again, I see this a lot, especially with the internet left and how they respond to critics from the right or from liberals. And they talk about pie in the sky. They talk about this like, oh, it's all hippie bullshit. Maybe all you have is hippie bullshit. If that's all you have, try it.
Yeah.
Because we deserve to feel good. That's how I look at this.
Yeah, and that's exactly the whole point of it is just do it. Make sure you're analyzing things. Make sure you're doing what serves you. And if something doesn't sit right or doesn't feel right, you don't need somebody else to necessarily tell you it's wrong in order to make a change. Follow your gut and make those decisions. Really think about the world around you and the world you live in and what shaped it, which is a very broad way of putting things. But also, it's okay to recognize, like you were kind of saying, that there are very real implications to the world around you. And, like I said, I think the institution of marriage, and especially the state's involvement in it, is silly. I think it doesn't serve me. I don't think it's designed to serve me. Well, it does serve me. I guess I should say it's not designed to serve me. It's designed to help people that fuck them. However, I realize that there is a very real implication that I stand to benefit from. And I, at my current stature and where I am in life, I can't afford to throw that benefit away. And it's not wrong to engage with it as long as you understand the implications of the system that you're participating in. And you're not hurting other people, is the other side.
Well, absolutely. You got to do what you have to do to get through the day at the end of this. I'm not saying that you need to demand revolution when you don't have a plan. But if you get that nagging sense of shouldn't there be something sacred about this, or shouldn't there be something good about this, hold on to that, because I think that's good. Yeah.
View the world with a critical eye, but also it's okay to prioritize your needs amid what's going on. Because
we're
yeah,
by. So of course, within reason, do what you can. But
we're all running the rat race.
but again, the pain in your soul is good. Trust me, it's good. Okay, so thanks again for another wonderful session. Where can people find you if they want more?
My Twitter, which usually is Audie tags on his, but it's at glitterfree08, is my Twitter handle, which is a Gorillaz reference for anyone that cares.
I will tag you again, of course. The show is Greenhouse Gaslighting. You can follow us also on Twitter at @podgreenhouse, or look up Greenhouse Gaslighting on Facebook, Instagram, Grinder. I don't fucking care. And
online.
Yeah, all in all, thanks again, dear listener, for coming through once again. And if I don't hear from you soon enough, I'll see you all in the greenhouse once again. Take care.